So where would you like to begin?
Well, I where I'd like to begin is we can just kind of have this conversation flow. But I will tell you that I did have an experience as a staff member. Part of being a staff member is you're in a very high pressure environment a lot of the times, and we can get into what those things are and as to why those reasons are. But as a staff member, late in my career, I would have a center manager that would call me into their office and would choke me with their two hands for not keeping the landmark form registration targets, and then at times would punch me in the arm because we weren't going to keep the target on numerous occasions. And I would go home and I would take my shirt off and I'd have a bruise on my bicep. And when I was reading Anne's book, I couldn't help but remember those experiences that I had. And it's just completely unacceptable to to be to be assaulted and to be physically abused in that way. I was young at the time. I had that happened to me today, I would have handled the situation very differently, very likely than at the time I was in my early 20s. And you I started to have the so many memories of the different verbal abuse situations that I was in day in and day out as a staff member, all in the name of transformation, all in the name of, we have to keep these targets because we're transforming the world. It was one, you were presented with one thing when you were a consumer, when you were a customer, but as a staff member, as someone who's working in this organization, is a very different story. It was a very different experience.
Yeah. Wow. Well, when you talk about, first of all, just it's very, very big of you to talk about this, and it's a lot. It's a lot to say that, to
Yeah.
just have said that live to the world. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I know that I don't think Landmark in general of all my years that that kind of story is common. However, I have heard since I did the interview I did countless stories of people really, really having abusive situations, and many of them were physical abuse and just complete unacceptable behavior.
Yeah.
So could you kind of, what I had to deal with, and I don't know if this is how you feel out of reading her book, and it's like I just kept dealing with this question, and my therapist said it was a really good question. It was, how did I get here? Like in the year 2024, here I am,
Yeah.
and so could you take us to like a how, see, because one would say, how could anybody let that happen to themselves? Like, so if you kind of processed that or picked it apart, like what would lead you to be in a relationship that would get that out of hand? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think it really starts, and we can really start in the beginning. I mean, I was really young when I first participated in the Landmark Forum. I was just a teenager, really, and I
Well, how old were
accelerated.
you? How old were you?
I was 15.
Yeah, that is a teenager. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, and I accelerated through the Landmark's curriculum. I mean, when I first participated in the Landmark Forum, I was a different person. I had vision for the future. And like many people who participate in the Landmark Forum, they have this, like they say, right, this experience, like they're going to go out and they're going to, pursue their dreams, and the list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
That was very much me. And I started participating heavily in Landmark's programs, and I was leading introductions to the Landmark Forum. I ended up participating in Landmark's Introduction Leaders program at a very young age. I don't think it is called that now. I think it's something else, but essentially it's Landmark's leadership
It's
program,
called
right?
now the it's not the exact same program, but it's now called the Leaders Training Program, is what it's
The
called now.
leaders training program. And
Hmm.
you're trained to be a program leader for Landmark. You're trained to bring people to Landmark by leading introductions. And I got quite effective at doing that. I was leading guest rooms and introductions, and I was signing people up into the Landmark Forum, and it was a fun game to participate in. You had this experience like you were really changing the world. Like every single person that you registered, you were really changing the world with that person.
And you're doing all
And
that as a teenager.
I'm doing all that as a
So like
teenager before I did.
other teenagers are like, smoking dope and getting into trouble and
Yeah, going
avoiding
to parties.
class.
Totally.
And you're over there leading introductions, registering people, and making a difference in people's lives.
Make a difference in people's lives. And most of my evenings were in the Landmark Center. Most of my evenings were assisting at Landmark. And
Mm.
so shortly after I graduated from high school, I went into the Landmark Center and I asked the center manager if I could go on staff. I asked, what would it take for me to be a staff member? And she said, well, you just got to fill out this application, and then we'll have somebody speak to you. And so I did. I was all excited, and I filled out the application. I was going to be a staff member. I was like right out of high school. Like, my path was there were people that I really admired. There were forum leaders, there were center managers, there were staff members that I really admired, that I wanted to be like. I wanted to emulate those people. These people were making such a difference when they got up to the room, and they were transforming people's lives. And so that was my end goal. I didn't need to go to college. I didn't need to do any of that. All I needed to do was be a staff member. If it kind of
Yeah.
captures my excitement for it. And so I did. I ended up interviewing with one of Landmark's regional directors, and they said, "Look, we don't have an opening in the center that you're in, but we could have you go on staff in a different city if you're open to that."
Mm.
And part of being a staff member is your party agreement is that uh, you agree to be willing to relocate, and really basically you could be transferred to any of Landmark centers at any point. And so
Yeah,
I
you're
was.
relocatable. You're
You're
relocatable.
relocatable.
Yes,
That's what it
yes,
was.
yes,
You're
absolutely.
relocatable, right?
Yes, exactly.
If you want to be a successful staff member, you're willing to relocate, right? So, or or as the Landmark used to say, is if you've constituted yourself as the enterprise, then you're willing to relocate. I
Yes.
was so so freaking constituted myself as the enterprise, Brian. I was the enterprise living through me. It was like, that was it. And so I did. I ended up relocating, and I landed in New Jersey. That was my first center. And my dad and I got in the car and we drove cross country. And it was like, how fast can you get there? As minimal pit stops as you can. And we stayed in like these, you know, whatever hotels along the way, because there was only a certain budget that Landmark was going to reimburse. And so we needed to make sure that we did it as fast as possible and as economical as possible. Because there was, small relocation budget, and there was, that was it. And I was arriving in New Jersey. There was an amazing woman who kind of took me into her house, because I had no apartment. I had nowhere to live. So when I got to New Jersey, I had a bedroom with a bed in it, and it was cozy. But I had come from like living at my parents' house and now I've got this like accountability in a different
Mm.
center. I don't know anybody, and I'm living in this little bedroom, but I don't need more than that because most of my time is going to be spent in the center. And so I get to New Jersey and I'm just this little kid, really. And I get handed this binder full of graduates. You know, when you first start on staff, your entry level position really is usually, not always, but usually you end up interacting with Landmark's graduates. You don't really responsible or accountable for the Landmark Forum, where you're interfacing with a much bigger department, right? Where you're
Yeah,
people
it's
that
like
have never come.
you basically an entry level position would be working with pre-existing customers, whereas like in facing the
Correct.
public and new people, that would be a more senior level job. Yeah.
Correct. And so, New Jersey is such a small center. So usually an entry level position is responsible for like multiple entry level positions. So
So
you
what
have,
were all your what was everything you were responsible for?
so if I recall correctly, it was seminars, both communication programs, registration fulfillment for, I believe it was the advanced course. The finance department was really just 2 staff members in that center. So it was really everything except for the Landmark Forum.
Wow. Okay, good. Got it. Okay, good. So every
And
program, so you're accountable. What were your
just the whole
hours?
thing.
What hours was a typical day?
My typical day was get in around, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes, I'd get in around 7 if things really needed it. But the center really needed a lot of help. And so you were there a long time. So let's just say 8 o'clock. And usually I wasn't out of there until probably like 9 or 10 p.m. So it
Got
was a
it.
solid like 14 hour day.
Yep.
And so I was really working 2 shifts in one day.
Mm.
There was the morning shift, and then it was like, freshen up and get ready for your evening shift when the graduates came in for their seminars and for their assisting agreements and all of that.
Yes.
And so the first week, Brian, you probably remember some of this, but I get handed a binder of graduates, and it was like, okay, just so you know, there's a target to keep this week. And the targets were, you just got to sign so many people into seminars. You got to sign up so many people into seminars. You got to sign up so many people into self-expression and leadership programs, so many people into communication course. And at the same time, we got to make sure that you finish your new hire paperwork, that you sign all these documents, that you watch all these videos. It's all this training. And so your day fills up quite quickly. And I had much experience registering people in Landmark's programs because, like I had said, there was so much excitement for me coming out of Landmark, and I just wanted everybody to participate. So I was registering people into everything all the time. But the big wake-up call for me was after the first week. As a staff member, you're required to submit your statistics to World Headquarters every Friday at 3 p.m. So there's like this mad rush on Friday morning to make sure that all the targets are kept so that the department and as a center, you're a yes for the week. And there's this big tracker that has a big green Y on it or a big red N on it. And as a staff member, you're either you're tracked like how many Y weeks have you had in a row, or how many no weeks have you had. And you literally could miss your target by 1 and be a no that week. And so I remember having a conversation with the center manager and with the regional centers division director, and just getting dealt with for not keeping the target, and how this is just like completely unacceptable. And that was not what that's not who a staff member is. A staff member keeps their targets. A staff member is a person of their word. Where's my integrity out? What's incomplete in my life? I mean, it was just like this scavenger hunt to figure out why it wasn't that we hadn't kept the target. Mind you, I was my first week on the job, and most companies have targets, so I'm not oblivious to that. But it was how you're dealt with when the targets aren't kept.
Yeah.
That
What's
was really unsettling for me.
what you're pointing to there, which is like just something to people to underline, is that so if you are, you're this kid, you're a teenager, you're learning about this thing about being your word. You just brought that up, right? So that
Yeah.
wasn't the first time that being your word was that the first time you were introduced to the concept of keeping your promise?
So, at Landmark, you learned the concept of integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the first time, but it was the first time that I got that there's no reason for you not to, like, it's completely unacceptable for you not to keep your word as a staff member when it is, especially when it comes to the Landmark registration targets. I had learned integrity as if you don't keep your word, you can clean it up. I had learned integrity as I'm not as honoring your word, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is none of that when it comes to keeping the registration target.
Correct.
It is you keep it and that's it.
Yeah, it's
So
who you are. You
it's
are
who
your
you are.
word, and your word is that target, and that is who you are.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So I learned that very fast. And my entire staff, my entire tenure on staff really was so that I didn't ever have to have a conversation again about not keeping those targets,
Yeah.
because it was just brutal. So